Thank you. All right. Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, for me, I'm trying.
No, you're good. You gotta get that Zoom bar back.
Yeah,
All right. Next up, we have Gabrielle Lommel. Her project is called Knitty Gritty. And Gabrielle joined EDA after a few different roles in higher education. In her free time, she enjoys gardening, biking, and most of all knitting, which inspired her solo project, the Knitty Gritty. And Gabrielle, the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you, Blaine. Like Blaine said, my name is Gabrielle Lommel, and today I'm going to share my app, The Knitty Gritty, with you all. Let me just minimize my Zoom here. Okay. So I've been knitting some of my own clothes for a few years now, and some of the issues that I've been running into is that over the years, I've accumulated a lot of patterns, yarns, and ideas for projects, but I really haven't come up with a good system to keep track of them. And then I also like to buy a lot of yarn while I'm traveling, and when I'm doing so, I don't have access to the yarn that I have at home. So I end up buying things that are similar, and then I often forget which projects I had in mind when purchasing a yarn because I'll buy something and then it'll be months before I start working on the project. And then lastly, I really have nowhere to keep track of notes and modifications I make to patterns, which comes in handy if I'm ever going to make the project again. So my solution to these problems is the app that I've developed called the Knitty Gritty. This is a space for knitters to keep track of their yarn and the projects they had in mind when purchasing them. It allows the user to keep track of patterns in one spot, and then you can take notes and monitor your project progress as you're working on your project. So to get into a little demo of my app here, I've already logged in. This is my page, so I've already loaded it with my yarn, my patterns and projects and all of my information. But if you're a new user, you would see kind of a blank slate and you would have the option to start adding your own stuff. So this is the home page. It displays your favorite yarns and then your favorite patterns down here. So you'll see on these cards, it gives you the most important details about your yarn, such as the brand. And then I like to put the location where I purchased it, just because I like to remember that memory behind it. And then the weight of the yarn, which is essentially the thickness, and then how many grams you have in your stash. These are kind of the most important details that I would need to know when starting a project. So I like to have them right up front. And then clicking on the details button here, we can flip to the back of the card and see some additional details such as the fiber content, the dye lot. This piece is really important because I can't tell you how many times I've purchased a yarn, started a project, and thrown away the tag. And there's a lot of variations in dye lots when you're buying yarn, so you want to buy them from the same one. And then I also have my notes here, so I can write down which pattern I had in mind when I purchased the yarn. And then we can also go to the next page and see all of our favorite yarns. Another feature on this homepage is to remove them from our favorites list. So that'll take it off there. And then down here, we have our favorite patterns. And this is very similar to the yarns. You can see the title of the pattern, the designer. You can remove it from the favorites. And then clicking on the details, we can see the back of the card. This shows us the pattern type, the difficulty level, the recommended yarn weight, and then any notes that you wanted to include. So going back there. And then if we go up here to this hamburger button over here, we can view our yarn stash. So this is all of the yarns that we have in our inventory. These are the same cards that were on the favorites page. So they're laid out very similarly. Additionally, we can edit some of the details. So if you acquire more yarn, you can update your total grams. And then you can also update any notes. If your pattern ideas have changed, you can update that here and submit those. And so we can add and remove from our favorites on the home page. And then we can also, when we buy a new yarn, we can add all of the details about it here. And then another feature is to upload your own photos. So we'll go back to the inventory. And then looking at our pattern library, this is very similar to the yarn inventory where we can see all the details here. We can remove and add to favorites. And then when you purchase a new pattern, you can add those details here, including adding photos as well. And then the last big feature of our app is the project tracking. So this was originally a stretch goal and I had plenty of time to work on it, which was really exciting. But when I'm starting a new project, I can click on this start new project form right here. And then the select pattern dropdown gives me all of the patterns that I own that are in my library. And then we can select a yarn from our inventory here, the date started, the grams of yarn that we need, and then needle size. And then we can also add photos on this page as well. So we're gonna go back to we're gonna go look at my project inventory. This is where you can see all of your projects that you have planned, in progress, and some that you've completed. You can see that I have a few here that I knit last year, a few sweaters that I made. And then let's look at a project that I'm working on right now. So this is a dress that I'm knitting and it'll show you all the details that you need, such as here I have a photo from the designer, a couple of progress photos of my dress, and then I can see details about the grams needed, the grams used, and then my progress. So this will actually update. For example, last night I was working on this dress and I weighed it. You can put it on a kitchen scale to weigh how many grams your project weighs. So let's say, I think it was around 800. So we'll submit that, and then our progress updates to 80%. And then back in our yarn inventory, we can see that our grams and stash went down. So those two are connected. And then another feature of the project tracking is this notes section down here. So when you want to add a new note, you can click this plus button and these input fields pop up. And then we can just type in a new note here, say we're all done. And then so you can keep track of your progress on the project there. And we'll go back to our inventory. And that's all I have for my demo. Go back to my slides here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take those. Otherwise, here's my contact information on the screen. And thank you all for being here today.
Awesome demo. Thank you. Great job. So main question to kick us off here would be, I love how specifically tied the workflow is to your hobby. You know, a very exact use case, which is always really fun. What would you say? I don't know. Could you just reflect a little bit on building a project that is something that meets the needs that directly apply to your hobby, your workflow, something specific to you? What would that feel like to do? And just kind of reflect, I guess, on you as the user, as the person designing and hopefully using the application.
Yeah, that's a good question. So my workflow, I spent a lot of time scoping out this project. I originally had a couple of different ideas for my solo project, and one of them I wasn't as passionate about, but this one I really was. And so I chose this one. And I spent a lot of time scoping it out. I had a lot of features that I wanted to include, but I kind of narrowed it down with the encouragement of my mentors to focus on a couple of things at once. So I started with the inventories, and then I found myself, I was actually really excited to work on this project. I spent a lot of time on it because it was just something I was really passionate about. So I ended up spending a lot of time and I hit some of my stretch goals like the project tracking. And then there's more things that I want to do in the future. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Great. And then a couple questions from the audience here. Mark Tran asks, what did you learn about software development during the project that you didn't know before?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, it was my first time using any sort of APIs. I used Cloudinary for my image upload. So I learned a lot about what that process looks like. And it was actually really tricky. I thought that, I was going to be able to just copy and paste the code in there and it would magically work. And that's not how it went at all. My database was not set up very well for photos. So I had the help of one of our instructors, Dave, and we had to write like a really ugly function to get it to work. And so it just made me realize that every project is going to be so different and you need to learn to adapt to different situations.
Great. And then a couple other ones here. How about, let's see here. Yeah, so Jade and Kara ask kind of a combination. Kara says, congrats on finishing that stretch goal. Tell us about a challenge you encountered and how you dealt with it. And Jade says, interesting project, and what were some challenges specifically working on the back end?
Yeah, like I mentioned, Cloudinary with the image upload, that was a big struggle. And then just working with the database in general was a struggle. I think I had about 10 or 11 different tables, and there were many times where I had to drop them and re-add them, and I altered a lot of them. So I just, went with the flow and adapted. And I learned a lot about how those things are set up and how important it is to take the time to map out your database in the beginning.
Great. And final question coming from Jonathan Worry. Are there any other problems or ideas that you'd like to tackle next? Maybe stretch goals or what you want to work on kind of beyond the scope of the solo project?
Yeah, one of my next big goals, I want to keep working on this project, definitely, because it's really helpful to me, and I hope that it's, maybe helpful to other knitters out there. But one of the next pieces that I'd like to tackle is more of a community feature. So I'd like to have user profiles where you can follow other people, message other people, and then some sort of community forum where you can share ideas and tips and things like that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice work.